Hello. Why are we here? God answered that question for Israel as soon as he brought them out of bondage in Egypt. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, God told Israel at Sinai. But there was an if attached. And we might summarize the if as, if you obey my commandments and keep my covenant. Well, 700 years later, most Israel had still not grasped their calling. But Yahweh still promised, and I quote from Isaiah 61:3, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord, Yahweh, has risen upon you. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But Yahweh will rise upon you, and his glory will appear upon you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising." But another 700 years goes by, and then Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount has to make a paraphrase of this to the same nation, Israel. He says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." Of course, we Christians take that as now a reference to our calling and destiny as Christians, and rightly we should, because we have entered into the covenant blessings God promised to Israel. But on the other hand, at the time he was saying it to the nation itself. So 1400 years have gone by since Moses originally was given the message to give to Israel that you are to be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and you are to be a light to the world. Only a few listened to Jesus, though, and they were Jews too. In fact, all of those who heard him in those first few years were Jews. After all, he was sent to none but the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Some Jews, at least, his disciples, had prepared their hearts for Messiah. But how did God prepare them? One of the great shocks of my nearly 50 years in the Old Testament now is the slow realization that came upon me over those decades that there were no schools in ancient Israel. That is, no public schools. So how did God ever expect a people to become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation without schools, without universities, without seminaries, without even what we might call churches? Well, I'd like to read to you from what D.F. Payne has to say about the nature of education in ancient Israel. Payne is a quite prominent Old Testament scholar of the last generation, and he is writing here in a familiar volume to most pastors and serious students of the Bible, the New Bible Dictionary. Payne says, "The place of learning was exclusively the home in the earliest period, and the tutors were the parents. And teaching in the home continued to play an important part in the whole of the biblical period. As it developed, the synagogue became the place of instruction. Indeed, the New Testament and Philo support Schurer's view that the synagogue's purpose was primarily instructional, and only then devotional. The synagogue ministry of Jesus consisted in teaching. The first tutors were the parents, as we have seen, except in the case of royal children. The importance of this role is stressed here and there in the Pentateuch. And he gives us an example, Deuteronomy 4, verse 9. Even as late as the Talmud, it was still the parent's responsibility to inculcate the law, to teach a trade, and to get his son married. After the period of Ezra, however, there arose a new profession, that of the scribe, the teacher in the synagogue. Well, we'll talk about the synagogue's role in education of Israel in a different video, but for now, here's more information on the parents' responsibility. He talks about the scope of education. Payne says the child would learn ordinary moral instruction from his mother, and a trade, usually agricultural, plus some religious and ritual knowledge from his father. The interplay of religion and agricultural life would have been self-evident at every festival. The festivals also taught religious history. So even at the earliest period, everyday life and religious belief and practice were inseparable. This was the more so in the synagogue, where Scripture became the sole authority for both belief and daily conduct. Life indeed was itself considered a discipline. Education then was and remained religious and ethical, with Proverbs 1 verse 7 its motto. Girls' education was wholly in their mother's hands. They learnt the domestic arts, simple moral and ethical instruction, and they were taught to read in order to become acquainted with the law. Their education was considered important, however, and they were even encouraged to learn a foreign language. Now, this is quite the contrast with the pagan nations around them, and even with later Judaism, where it was no longer encouraged for women to learn, even to take basic instruction in the law was regarded as somehow demeaning to a woman. But this was not the case in early Judaism, pre-exile Judaism specifically. Notice his reference at the end of that section to Proverbs 1:7, where it says, the fear of Jehovah, or the fear of Yahweh, is the beginning of knowledge. So why are we here? Genesis 1 tells us why. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over it. But the rest of the Old Testament fills out the how we are to be fruitful, fill the earth, subdue it. And even the rest of the Old Testament and of course the New Testament fill out the why as to God's ultimate purpose in all of this. And so, if you wanted to summarize what the Bible's message is about why we are here in the Old Testament and New Testament terms, Deuteronomy 6 as well as Ephesians 6, Paul's summary, it's given to all parents to share in God's creation. We're a race of beings, male and female, made in His image. Do we believe this is our purpose on the planet? The purpose of life itself. It's our privilege to help create the image of God, not only in our own children, but in every life our life touches.